Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Lovecraft Country Season 1, Episode 9. It's called Rewind 1921. So full spoilers for the episode. I will admit the title of this one I felt like it spoiled what the episode was going to do, because I saw the title and went, well, if we're not time travelling, then this title's bullshit.
It could have just been flashbacks.
It could have been. But given that they introduced the time machine, it felt fairly lightly.
I agree. I'm just saying, I didn't actually see the title beforehand, so I didn't have that problem.
I happened to see it. Just having 1921 wouldn't have said it to me, but the word rewind just, I don't know, it just cinched it. But
I think you could have done just rewind and you wouldn't have leapt to necessarily time travel.
No, not at all. Not just, I honestly even made it be a negative point. It's just simply that it's this is very descriptive of what the episode is. In fact, this episode is actually rather fantastic, and I don't really have many a negative thing to say about it.
See, now you're making me want to find a negative, even though I'm not sure I have any. But
well, don't be horrible and just accept that it's a fantastic episode, and we can bask in its fantasticness.
I mean, we could do that. I feel like we've been doing that a lot on this show.
We have been doing it a lot on this show. Do you know what I think I really appreciate about this episode is we have this time travel episode where they go back to 1921, they go back to the Tulsa Massacre, which is insane that HBO, within a year, did this twice, because Watchmen also had a scene in the Tulsa Massacre, and it's amazing that this thing that has not been well represented in history or taught has now been brought up in two prestigious TV shows, and kind of like, now I feel like, now that I've seen it twice, I don't think I'm an expert by any means, but I feel like it's cemented as something I know happened at some point in history. Like, I have an understanding.
It's a good start
of the broad stroke of it. It's I don't know. It's just, it's impressive. It's partly coincidental. I'm sure HBO didn't set out to do it, but it happens. They gave a platform to two different teams to go and do their shows, and clearly, and it was never an issue that they were both tackling the subject. So, but anyway, what I really appreciate about this is that, so we do time travel, they go back to 1921, and we have interacting with the past, and they get up to some things that you typically expect in a time travel show going back to the past. But I think the thing that I really respect about this is that none of the time travel things themselves are actually that amazing or intricate. What makes all of it work stupendously is just the raw drama and emotion, and I guess the performances of the actors when they encounter each of the things. I don't think, because there's a whole moment where the mysterious stranger, and you can see it coming a mile off, that Tick's going to be the mysterious stranger.
Yeah.
Right? Which is not a complaint. I think it's meant to be foreshadowed. You're meant to, as soon as he says that what this mysterious stranger said, and it's exactly what the baseball player Jackie Robinson said in the dream sequence back in episode 1, Tick's going to be the hero with the baseball bat. You just know it. What makes all this work is the freaking fantastic speech Montrose gives as he's crying and talking about how he's always going to be his father no matter what, even though he might be George's, because he admits that this episode, he might technically be George's son. But no, I always wanted to be your father, and because he wants to intervene, and Tick says, no, think about what this might change. I might not exist if you do this. And he's like, no, like, this was just the first of the line of sacrifices I made to be your father. I swallowed my pride. There's so many things that get in the way of potentially being your father, and I did it no matter what, and I'm always going to be your father. It was a beautiful kind of, like, not even a double-sided or double-layered speech. There was like 3 layers to it, which made it so impressive. It was, I always made these choices, so this is how important you always were to me. It was always going to happen, so it was always important to me in the first place. And there's another layer that I can't quite describe, but there's a lot going on here where he's really saying a lot in multiple ways,
and he's like crying through this speech.
Oh, it's wonderful. Both of them are crying. They're both doing a fantastic job.
I think this is probably Montrose's standout episode, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
And we've talked before, we kind of have expectations on him as an actor, in that, okay, we know what to expect from him. And up till this point in the show, he has delivered on those expectations. I think this is the first time he's gone above and beyond.
No, wonderful. And it's not the only standout scene of this nature either. A similar, because he's given this speech as they're watching his younger self with his teen boyfriend, essentially. He never says those words, but that's what we're seeing. It's what he's describing. And he's witnessing this where his friend is shot in the face as the riots and the massacre is starting. But just earlier, there's a very similar sequence where we watch him be sort of beat by his father outside the house and in public. And it's a very similar thing where he's like standing there kind of like just not narrating it, but filling in some extra little details. My favourite moment, I think, was when Tick's mother comes out, because she lives next door. And that's the house I try to go to, because that's the house that has the book of names, which is the whole reason why they're here. But she comes out and she sort of chastises George a little bit for not sticking up for his brother a little bit more. And I love this moment where he looks, young George looks really defeated by this, and we just hear Montrose say, "That wasn't true. He stuck up for me all the time. She just never saw it. It was always indoors, or it was in other ways. It was never maybe a show of brute force, but it was always something. It was always there for him."
He may not have been challenging their father directly in the way that she's insinuating he should have done there, but he obviously was providing support in other ways.
It's just these moments where like none of the time travel stuff it does, because when we watch a lot of time travel stories, like we get really complimentary when we feel like it's been really inventive, or it's doing something really intricate that we've either not seen before, or it's using the time travel to sell a particular. And obviously, this is using the time travel for them to literally witness moments from Montrose's past. But
and there are points where you're like, oh, it's cool. This is the rules of time travel. Like it's playing with this always happened essentially. And once you kind of realize that, it's like, oh, cool, we're playing those rules. It's got those kind of feelings to it.
But that's not what stuck out to me. It was just the raw emotion and how it actually affected the characters, what they were seeing. Rather than us, let's face it, geeking out over the rules and how intricate they are. It was more about the raw human side of it, and you can only do that with good writing and good acting. So
you can, and the rules that they were playing with weren't particularly interesting. As I say, I was like, oh, cool, they're doing this version of time travel just because we're nerds and like time travel. So there's just that's what we're doing. But it wasn't like, all episode I'm there going, what are they going to do with the time travel? How are they going to change things? All these other bits. I just want to see everything unfold, the way it did, essentially.
Yeah, and there's an uneasiness, even though technically two of the characters have to be safe. One, because Letty's literally, bulletproof and can't be hurt.
Yeah.
One, because we know when Tick's is supposedly going to die. So he theoretically can't die here yet anyway. So Montrose is the only one who theoretically, the older Montrose, could, in theory, die here. But he is in the middle of this massacre. Like, it's not like he's safe because he's from the future. Like, anyone committing these heinous acts aren't going to look at him and just ignore him because he might not be from their time period. So, like, there's this kind of air of like danger, even though two of our characters are technically like in no danger at all. But it does lead to, obviously, a beautiful sequence where they're waiting for Letty. Letty's not back yet, because basically Tick has to go and deal with Montrose because he's ran off, and it turns out he's ran off to the park where all this goes down, where eventually Tick steps in as the stranger and saves them. But she's left on her own, and she does get chased, she does get attacked, and she ends up in the house with Tick's like grandparents and so on, and uncles and aunties or whoever, and she ends up having to get the book herself, and she does. She actually convinces the grandmother to give up the book by convincing, hey, we're from the future, because she notices her shoes at one point, because she does change into that very familiar looking dress, might I add. We saw that already in the dream sequence. But she notices the shoes, and what's so funny about this actually is that them being from the 50s and then going to the 20s is that all of a sudden I am noticing like how modern the 50s stuff feels compared to the 20s, even though the 50s stuff to me looks ancient.
Comparatively, yeah. I get where you're coming from. I also like, that she could have maybe bluffed a way out of it, being like, because the grandmother's not exactly, a young woman. She went, it's just a new fashion, the sort of thing you could probably bluff your way through if you wanted to.
Yes. Although she did catch her rummaging through drawers and stuff. That's less... That's
more suspicious, yeah.
Easy to deal with. But she's like, hey, she gives her all this proof and explains who she is. And we get this, this scene, because we'd heard already that the family were all burned alive in the house, basically. And Letty stays in there.
Yeah, and and you have that grandmother kind of coming to the realization of, if you came back to now, to get this, that means we're not around to give it you in the future, essentially.
Yeah. So she sort of accepts her death. And it comes right after, because there's a scene right before this where Letty's with one of the other family members, one of the younger girls, who she basically has to assure everything's going to be okay to, knowing full well that it's not. That they're all going to die tonight. And it is very heartbreaking. The visuals of her standing there with the fire around her, which very, very dramatic. Obviously, this is one of these things where there was a risk of this being maybe a dodgy sequence just because of an effects point of view. This is the sort of thing where once you start messing around with a lot of CG fire, it can lead to some bad things.
Fire can be tricky.
And I never felt it crossed a goofy line in terms of the effects. I always felt like they did a good job of making it feel, if not completely real, it always felt, I mean, you had this kind of like safety net of like, well, if it's done looking real as it's hitting her, it's because she's got like a secret force field, so it would look unnatural, so we can kind of go with it a little bit.
Real isn't the right word either, because it's not like, exactly realistic. Yeah. But
symbolic.
I think it's surreal. It has that feel to it. And because of that, any kind of slight wonkiness in the effects is kind of covered up by the atmosphere and the tone anyway, and you don't feel it as being distracting.
But at least at this powerful moment where she's running late and they're waiting, and like, obviously we'll get to the setup for all this. We've skipped to the time travel stuff because obviously it's the most interesting stuff in the episode, but we'll get back to all the setup. But Hippolyta is struggling to keep the portal open, and her hair goes all like electric blue. It does kind of funky, actually. I like that. But you see this wonderful, powerful sequence of Letty just storming down the main street in Tulsa with all these explosives going off around her, and just not being effective. Obviously, it's a very powerful image of this young black woman walking down the Tulsa massacre, but not being affected. Things literally bouncing off of her. And we could, I'm sure there's people who could sit and analyze what this could all mean in terms of like what it's supposed to represent. I'm going to leave that for other people and just say that I get the power of it, and you know, it's a beautiful moment. In fact, it leads to, I think this is the only episode that's not switched to Sinnerman when it hits the credits. This is the one that just kept... It
is, yeah.
Yeah, it kept the ethereal kind of operatic
whatever song
music.
It was playing, yeah. Because I noticed it as well, because when it cut to the credits and just carried on playing, I felt the impact of that. You know, the fact that it didn't just switch back to normal, which is, you know, there's a comfort in the ending song, right, of a show, the credits, where it kind of resets things back to normalcy. And this, you know, by continuing what it is, it leaves you in that mood, you know, that atmosphere, just for an extra 30, 40 seconds, whatever it is. It doesn't, you know, force your brain back to reality straight away.
Yeah, the example I always go back to, not the best show in the world, but 24 was an easy example just to show what this is doing here. On 24, whenever it cut to the clock, for the ads or the end of the episode, it would always go, well, it's not quite a beeping, but it had this like sound effect as the clock was ticking. It was like, do but more oomph. I can't really make the sound, but
sure.
But whenever there was like a really sad or dramatic ending, the clock would come up, but it would just play silently. There'd be no sound effect. So whenever it did that, it was like, oh, they're going for the extra oomph. They want it to feel sad and dramatic or whatever. That's the equivalent here, is that it always ends with the same song. So the minute you don't end with that song, it feels like, whoa!
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing you can only get away with after, you know, having that repeated pattern ingrained into people's brains. You know, we're on episode 9 now. You know, if you do this in episode 3 or 4, it doesn't have anywhere near the same impact. No,
this is, you know, 8 in a row, the same thing, and it's only 10 episodes of a season, so doing it in the second last episode, it feels something. Oh, and I'd almost argue that the last episode should go back to Sinnerman to give you that feeling of like an ending again, back to normal.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't know how it ends, admittedly. So I mean, it may not be appropriate.
But the end of any season, even if it's a cliffhanger, should feel like it ended. You know this. Let's be honest. We're probably looking at 18 months to 2 years before we get a second season, given scheduling, everything. You want that feeling of closure for your audience when you're making that show. Even on a cliffhanger, you want them to feel like, no, that was satisfying. And I think if you end on something that's off kilter intentionally, it's less satisfying for your audience, and you don't want to push anyone away like that.
Yeah. So no, all the time travel stuff was wonderful. it's one of those things where I got excited when I realized what they were doing. You know, when Hippolyta just sort of shows up and immediately says, "Okay, I know how I can fix Dee," because that's what the whole episode's about, fixing Dee. Her arms all went. In fact, there was a great comment last week. Now, admittedly, when I saw her arm, the state of her arm at the start of this episode, where her entire arm was like burned looking and like it was all infected, it sort of clicked even better for me. But admittedly, I don't know if I'd have thought of this if it wasn't for this comment. But we had a comment last week that said, "Hey, what if that lady in the future with the so-called robotic arm is Dee because her arm gets attacked at the end of the episode?" And then this episode starts with her entire arm, and I'm like, you know what? That's starting to sound kind of likely.
It's not a bad theory.
Yeah,
I do like that. It's essentially turning her into one of the the demon girls who were chasing her.
Yeah, she looks like that when they're doing the first ritual, which Christina agrees to do, but only if Tick agrees to go willingly to the ritual on the night of the equinox, whatever it is.
And basically, this will only reset the curse's progress. It won't get rid of it completely. She doesn't have that power. Only in theory, only the guy who cast it could have done that. Yeah,
which is why when Hippolyta shows up, she immediately they still have to save Dee. She's not saved yet. So she's like, no, we're going to do something. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I want to say I love the moment in that opening scene when they're debating what to do with Dee, and Ruby's there, and they're all like concerned, and they all feel guilty because they were all kind of ignoring her last episode. Well, maybe ignoring's a bit strong, but they were kind of like on their own thing, and they weren't necessarily looking out for her.
Preoccupied.
And Tech's like, you know what? I'll get Christina to help. I'll offer the pages. I'll offer the pages, and you just see Letty in the corner, and I'm like, you know what? I love this moment. I love that she's already done this, so they don't actually have this as a bargaining chip.
Yeah, and Montrose is furious. About this.
I thought he was going to take a swing at her.
So, I mean, I'm not convinced that he wasn't a second away from it.
Actually, I think this episode did a lot to humanize him even further. I thought there was a lot of stuff here where, between seeing how his father treated him for being who he is,
and what he just lived through in general.
Yeah, but also the way he talked about how he cut out every part of him that was soft so he could be a man, because men have sons, and this idea that that's why he became this hard ass of a person, because he was determined to prove that he was a hard ass, which I mean, obviously, we're thinking this from present day, going, well, you can be a hard ass and gay.
yeah, but it's very much the, I don't want to say cliche, because that's a bit unfair. It's very classic trope almost.
The belief of the time for, dare I say, ignorant people.
I think you dare.
Yes, or at least on this subject, ignorant anyway, at the very least. So I thought they did a good job. What's interesting is that I saw Misha Green on Twitter. I can't remember the exact comment or the exact thing she was replying to, but it was kind of like admitting a regret about how they handled the murder earlier in the season. It was kind of like basically saying that the execution wasn't maybe as well thought out as it should have been. And I think that
made him come across more evil than maybe they intended.
Yeah, maybe the point of what I'm doing, it wasn't as clear as it should have been. And given that we've debated that a little bit, and it almost feels like this. I don't want to say the show wants us to forget about it, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it fits in neatly with where we've went since.
Yeah, I appreciate actually some of the other mistakes that she's kind of owned up to.
Yeah, no, I thought so.
There was one I saw. Where was this machine? Can you remember? It popped up in big letters on the screen where they went to.
Oh, I can't remember. Is this the fast travel with Tick a couple episodes ago?
No, it's not even that. It's it was in like somewhere. I can't remember where it was now, but someone pointed out, going, "Hey, on that, on the atlas, the back at the time when we saw at the end of that episode with Dee in the car, it said it was in like Kansas or something, and now it's wherever." And she basically went, "Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't notice that was on the screen that said Kansas until after it aired."
That's a minor thing.
It is, but again, it's I appreciate just going, "Yeah, I just didn't notice."
That's basic. I mean, obviously it's not literally this, but it's in the context of what we're discussing here. That's basically a typo. Like,
no, it is, and it's completely irrelevant, and it really doesn't matter. It's a name. It has no impact, but it was more just the point of her owning up, going, "Yeah, I just didn't notice," and I can appreciate that attitude to it.
Well, I think what I love about this attitude is that this show has been so exceptionally written and performed, like, almost all the time, that the few things that are sticking out as maybe being missteps that are quickly forgotten about because the rest of it's so goddamn good. The fact that the creator, the showrunner, is saying, "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm like aware of this. There's, you know, like I'm aware of where the faults are." It makes me really excited about a potential season 2. That you know, even the people behind the camera are learning and adapting, and I don't know. It's, you know, it makes me really excited if this is. Because there's always a risk when you've got something where season 1's based on a book and then it may get season 2 and then it goes into new territory. And I think because of what the strengths of this show are, which I would argue aren't really the plot necessarily. The plots have been fun, but I don't think that's actually the strength of the show.
No, it's been the character drama, which is why, you know, if you look back at the season as a whole, so, you know, as we are right now, the points that, you know, me especially more than you have had, you know, some problems have been the episodes where it hasn't focused on our characters and it's diverted a little bit, maybe too much for my tastes, you know, and kind of done more plot things that maybe it had felt like it had to do. Whenever we've had episodes with, you know, especially this trio of characters all together, it's been pretty spectacular.
Yeah. So no, that's wonderful. Some mythology stuff. So, I mean, obviously we saw the adventure that Hippolyta had a couple episodes ago, but when she shows up in this episode, she like she's very, she's not like, it's not like she's confused or she's vague about where she went or anything. She straight up comes in and says, "I was on Earth." I can't remember what the number was, but it was like I was
506 or something like that.
I was on Earth 278, and I was gone, relatively speaking, 200 plus years. And I'm like, wait, so you've got 200 years of memories and like knowledge that you've just built up because time's like acting differently. I'm like, holy shit, that's insane.
It seems to be. And I actually love the moment of her appearance because it's right after Montrose says to Tick that, you know, he might be George's son. Because the idea is they need the closest blood relative possible for this ritual. And he's like, well, that'll be you. You're like an uncle. And he's like, well, you could be a half-brother.
Yeah.
You know. No, maybe that's a thing.
Yeah, but her mother walks in.
And then immediately she walks in, and you could just see Montrose kind of being like, damn it, I didn't need to tell him that.
Do you know what? I really appreciate that it was like this, where she, two aspects of this. One, that she just sort of walks in suddenly, and two, that she's very confident and doesn't, you know, because part of me was expecting like a portal to open somewhere, like in a different state, and her fall out of the sky and be confused and have to like have a plot with her trying to find her way back to the city and get back to the family.
In a lesser show, that episode 100% happens.
Yeah. And that might have been fine depending on the story that we're doing, but because they're doing this thing where no, she is super confident, she has learned, she's adapting. In fact, I love the moment when she's fixing the time machine and she mentions a motherboard, and Letty, understandably, a person in the 50s goes, "What's a motherboard?" I mean, to us,
it took me even a second to realize there was anything wrong with her saying it, because it's such a everyday common term now, right? You know, we know what a motherboard is. We don't even think about it. So the fact that, you know, she says it so confidently, and because she said it with such confidence and authority, I didn't even realize that it was weird at first. Yeah. Until she reacted, I was like, "Oh yeah, 50s, of course."
Yeah, and just everything where it's like because she's going to transport them, and she can do that because she's got the alien connectors that she got. Yep. She has to like think about where they're going, because she could very easily send them to 1921 in the wrong universe, and I love this. I love just how insane this is. Yeah,
it's really strong stuff.
And she does it simply just by having a photograph of the time period and says, okay, I can look at that and think about it, and that's all it takes. It's not like mathematics, it's not like insane, because she talks about how there's trillions of universes, literally trillions. So it's like, okay, this is the one, we want to be in the same universe, we want to go back to 1921. And as any good time travel story, they have a time crunch, because as soon as they arrive, oh shit, it's only X number of hours before all this bad stuff starts happening. We have to get in, we have to get out.
Yeah, and then you have at the end her struggling to hold the portal open as well.
Yes, leading to the electric blue hair, as I talked about. Very Bride of Frankenstein, I thought.
Well, I can see where you're coming from with that.
That's what it was making me think of. And they get back, and you know they've done it, and they're all happy, and that's kind of where we end the episode. Obviously, some other stuff to talk about though. Ruby and Letty having some differences. I'm enjoying Ruby. I think it's. all these plots have kind of came together in a way that's really fascinating to me. They've done this thing where they've made it really exciting when characters who have been kind of separate doing their own thing, like them then interacting with the main characters again, like Ruby, now that she's with Christina and knows who Christina is and is actually kind of sticking up for Christina, makes every interaction now like far more deft than it was before, far more delicate. It feels like there's a lot more going on, and because
it's got more purpose to it.
Yeah, like it doesn't just feel like, I mean, don't worry, I was enjoying when it was just introducing them and they were sisters and we're getting their relationship, but now that she has her own things and she's sort of sticking up for Christina to a fault, I would argue, because there's a moment where Letty's sort of debating with her when she's going to go in the car with her, and she says, hey, you know, she realized she's evil, right? I got shot, yeah, by her father. I'm like, Ruby, listen to yourself. I mean, it feels like you're really trying to sidestep the issue here.
Just a bit.
And it's because she's got all these promises, she's got all these things, and obviously she makes this, well, not a deal so much, but she's essentially agrees that it's okay for Christina to kill Tick as long as she promises not to hurt Letty, and Christina has no reason seemingly to hurt Letty, and you know, I mean, yeah, I'm expecting a season 2. I'm hoping for a season 2, so I am expecting them to somehow get out of the death of Tick somehow.
Yeah, I'm expecting it as well, but it would be incredibly ballsy if they didn't and there was still a season 2.
Like, I'm wondering, does he just get transported to the future for a while or something like that? Like, instead of dying, they think he's dead, but he's actually just, you know, not that I'm just trying to Barry Allen him into the Speed Force, but like, you know. I'm just because I'm expecting a season 2, and it's even the possibility is raised in this actually. Montrose and Tick talk about it at one point. That this future that you went to, what if it wasn't this Earth? What if this book came from an alternate future? And that is an interesting thing for them to bring up.
It is, and it would maybe be why certain elements in the book were changed, because on that Earth, those were, you know, the elements as it happened. A comment did confirm that all of those changes were in the original book, so which actually be kind of a neat idea to say that the literally the book that this is based on is just another, you know, it's kind of like how we kind of like retroactively fit all the DC movies and TV shows and the comics into the one thing, is because they're all just part of the same multiverse. Yeah, just one way or another. It just kind of go with it a little bit, and you know, it'll work, and I would be down for that here. Yeah, I'm okay with that. So no, all this mythology stuff was fascinating. I think I love that this show has taken what felt like really fairly minor characters early on, and even though I love the main trio, and the trio was kind of George, but then that turned out to Montrose, but even though I love the main trio, I kind of love how Hippolyta's become feeling very important, and I love her confidence and all the knowledge she's gained, and it's so unique to the other characters. Ruby's story's been very unique to the other characters. Even Dee's had something here which then feels unique to the other characters. Suspect she would have a bigger role next season as well.
Hippolyta?
D.
D for sure, yeah. I can see D having a lot to do going forward.
Hippolyta, I think you've got to be careful with that it's not just, you know, overpowered, essentially.
Sure, I can see her dying tragically to save everyone or something, just so that we don't have this powerful, you know, supreme being. You know, I think
that you know, there's a concern that could become a crutch very easily, and I say that even with trust in everything they've done so far, it's an easy thing to fall back on once it's there, right?
That's it. It's not like she has superpowers. She just has
incredible amounts of knowledge.
But there's definitely the things to do with that, at least for a bit, if they didn't want to like get rid of her immediately. You know,
no, that's true.
So no, I loved all that stuff. I did enjoy the police chief wasn't quite dead yet, and they were trying to save him. It seems like he's almost died a bunch of times, and they always save him by like giving him new body parts, but it's not quite working. I love that Christina puts on her Williams suit just to go and watch him die. Because he walked in and I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. And I thought, oh, what are they going with this? But when I realised all it was just to watch him die, just the smile on his face, I was like, you know what? I appreciate that just on its own. And obviously it does take the that one magical artifact thing away. So there was a small purpose as well, but
and I think it's a little bit weird because he's the one that placed the curse on Dee, right?
The chief, yes.
Yeah. So you know, and there's the whole bit where they say, you know, Christina tells the family that that he's really the only one that can remove it because it's him that cast it, and they're like, well, he's dead. And it's after this that she's like, well, he's not, and she obviously doesn't say anything, doesn't do anything about get him to remove the curse.
Yeah, and that's maybe something that'll upset Ruby if she finds out.
If she finds out, yeah. But I think it's important to note.
Yeah, I wonder if it's not his spell originally. I wonder if it's, let's say it's in the Book of Names because it came from someone else. Wonder if they can still change it because it came from, because they've really established in the mythology here that each spell is created by one particular person. And then other people learn it because they've, it's put in the book or whatever. That I find really fascinating, the idea that, will Tick eventually make a spell? Which, by the way, there's not a lot of talking about where they put that monster, which ended last episode. Don't think I didn't know. I mean, I noticed the gas leak story at the start.
I wonder if it just goes back down into the earth.
Yeah, I know. I assume so as well, but they're being very coy of it because I was thinking about it during the opening scene, but then the plot got going. I just kind of stopped thinking about it. But don't think I wasn't thinking about it a little bit. Where'd that monster go? Some thoughts.
Yeah, it'll be there, ready and waiting.
Actually, I am going to compare this in a serious way to the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Joe, I thought you might have done it earlier when we were talking about ending songs.
No. This is a more serious one that I do think is worth comparing. In this show, it's obviously the racism and obviously other stuff. Misogyny comes up and other things do come up, but primarily oppression, racism, those are the things that definitely come up the most in terms of real-world horror. And I think this show always does a good job of making them feel much worse than the supernatural horror. The supernatural horror is scary and, jumpy and it's fun, but the actual racism and bigotry always comes across as much more evil and sinister.
Been its strength since the very first episode.
Yeah. And that's actually something that it kind of shares with Buffy. Not that Buffy ever tackled those particular subjects, but Buffy always had this thing where if someone was killed by a natural, like a non-magical or a non-supernatural thing, so if there was a gun or an illness involved, it would always feel really harsh and real because they treated those with realism and never went back on them. So characters who died in those ways never came back. They always stayed dead, and it was always really shocking when it happened as well. Like the few times in Buffy when someone pulled out a gun, it always it always felt weird. It always felt like uncomfortable. And I think obviously it's a much smaller scale in that show, but I do think it is a comparable thing where here they're making it at the forefront, but it does. And I think it's important for that stuff, the real stuff, to feel more horrific because it is more horrific. It's the horrific that we actually face. Not the Lovecraftian monsters, but
no, I'm with you. This show's been great on that since, let's say, the first episode. All that stuff like in the diner, for example, is still some of the standout horror of the season.
Yeah.
Even though there was absolutely nothing supernatural involved.
Yeah, I think I felt more tense with them walking around Tulsa on this date than I did them, running the forest from monsters or whatever.
Yeah, I think the thing is when it comes to the monsters, barring maybe in the end of a season or with side characters, or they did the point with George obviously early on to make the point that no one's safe and to shock you. But as a rule, you feel a little bit safer. Like okay, they'll get out of this somehow. But when it's the real world, there are no cheats. There's no we can just use some magic and get out of it. It's got a bit more weight to it than that.
Yeah. So, no, it's really interesting. So I'm curious, we have one episode, we have the finale left. I'm fascinated to see how this is going to wrap up. And I do hope that it ends in a way where season 2 is possible because I want this cast back. I want this show to continue. And I don't think it was ever billed as a limited series. I think the idea is always that it could go on. And I don't see why it couldn't, honestly. Maybe it has to change the ending of the book, but honestly, go for it. I want more. I want more, damn it.
Yeah, I agree. To my knowledge, I never saw it referred to as a limited series, which is a good sign.
Yeah. So, and that said, HBO have went back in that a couple of times before and changed a limited series into something with a season 2. So it's possible even then if it is. But
they have, yeah.
I do really hope there's more of this because Watchmen always was kind of a one-season thing. And this is fantastic as well. So I really hope this actually gets to continue.
And as good as all the acting has been, we've been praising the acting across the board. None of them are like huge names where HBO can get all of them, no problem. Back for another season.
Well, yet. I say that because Majors has been cast in a couple of big movies recently. But
yes.
hopefully, of course, he's been locked down for a multi-season contract.
That's what I mean. I would assume they put in. I'm assuming that they put in multi-season contracts as standard, because
for sure, yeah.
Why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah, I think him and Smollett, I think both of them are only going to become bigger stars over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think in like 10 years' time, you might be struggling to get them on a HBO show that's not a limited series.
Oh, I think it, but even I think if they hadn't had them locked down to contracts for options for more seasons, I think they'd be struggling in 2 or 3 years' time to get them on.
You might well be right.
Yeah.
Both of them are fantastic.
Not a TV show, of course, but very similar ideas. Jennifer Lawrence getting signed up for like ongoing X-Men movies, and then immediately became famous with Hunger Games, and just all of a sudden regretted every contract she signed.
The misery of her in that last one. I don't know if you watched it or not yet.
I actually did. I watched it on stream a couple of months ago.
Just the misery from her, like, that is the definition of phoning in a performance, where she just did not want to be there.
It is. But at least for Jennifer Lawrence, that was phoning it in. For Sophie Turner, that was her trying her best and failing miserably. So,
I'm going to defend her a little bit and say I've seen her much better with better written material.
Okay.
Well,
I'm having a hard time believing it, but anyway, that's the penultimate episode of Lovecraft Country for the season. Super excited for the last one. I've been excited for this show every week. I'm absolutely in love with it. So I really hope that, I mean, for in a lot of ways, it is the closest thing I have to like a premium modern Buffy in a lot of ways. It's very different, but it's the closest thing. I mean, I guess Supernatural for a long time was kind of the closest thing on TV to it.
Yeah, that was probably. I wouldn't call that premium either.
No, that's not premium. But I mean, I just mean in general on TV, that was the closest thing. And then this is, and people are going to say things like other random vampire shows. They don't all count. Come on.
Yeah, it's not about the vampires.
No, it's not about the vampires. So before anyone tells me about that CW one with what's their faces, Vampire Diaries, is that what it's called?
Yeah, I will tell you now, Stargirl is closer to Buffy than Vampire Diaries is.
Oh, I would. I've not seen the Vampire Diaries, but I would assume so.
I've seen like 20 minutes that Paige watched at some point.
I would assume so. Why is she watching that?
She watches a lot of trash TV. What do you want me to tell you? She just sits and binge through 10 episodes on a day off sometimes.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Even a nasty taste in my mouth here. So that's Lovecraft Country. You can, of course, let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Do hit the like button. It's super important and is the easy and cheapest way of supporting us. You can hit that and it helps us out. YouTube will recommend us out to more people, and it is a great way to show that you like the content and keep it all coming. You can, of course, support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. Catch us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates, and I think that's pretty much it. So thank you very much once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any Cthulhu?